And that's why we need to talk about our freak of the week, Peter Thiel, who is one of the architects of this world that we're in. And as I started to say, I don't know how much you heard of my um, intro here, but
Most of it. I think I heard it.
good. Okay. So I wanted to talk to you about, first of all, because you're such a terrific writer on this topic. And by the way, she is a PhD and could be called Dr. Heffernan, but doesn't request that. But she's an English major, and I am too. And I think that bringing our humanistic point of view to the way that these men are operating is really important, even if we have no power to stop them, because we will be able to write the history of who they are and what they're doing for future generations. Hopefully, that will still be, uh, you know, there will still be readers in the future. So,
Hmm.
your article, your book review of Max Chafkin's, I'm pronouncing it right, Max
Yep.
Chafkin's book on Peter Thiel, was terrific. And I think you know a lot about the internet in addition because of the work that you were doing at Wired. And I just would like to talk to you a little bit about, how does Peter Thiel form? Like, what forms a person like this? How does a man turn into this kind of like anti-humanist zombie? Is it nature? Is it nurture? What are we? How do we get these types of people?
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up that we're both English majors because do you mind if I go back a little bit?
Please do.
Okay. I when I was trying to sell the book of mine that you mentioned, Magic and Loss, I was looking for an agent, and I wanted to know I wanted to write very much about the culture of the internet, not the science and tech of it. But the best-selling books on the internet were by Clay Shirky and Chris Anderson, and I just flipped through I was, like, on maternity leave and rushing to do this. I flipped through acknowledgments, and they all praised to the skies their agent, John Brockman, which brought me into a
Ooh,
world
Epstein.
of Epstein, exactly. So Jeffrey Epstein also, it looks like a big donor to Palantir, to Peter Thiel's organization, was funding and kind of whitewashing his fortune through this kind of intellectual impresario, as John Brockman styled himself. And he was surrounded at the time by Thiel, Sergey Brin, and other people. And I thought, well, I've got to be in the right place to sell this book. He did sell the book for a little bit, and I went on to contribute to some of their anthologies, annual anthologies of like the best thing that's been written this year on tech, and even Jeffrey Epstein would contribute. I'm not sure Peter Thiel contributed, but there was something in these anthologies of essays, mostly by tech moguls, not even writers, right? There were very few um, literary writers, like the kind of people or journalists. There were people kind of spinning out books like Thiel's Zero to One, and trying to, get the Malcolm Gladwell traction on the speaker circuit. But very few people that I thought of as writers. Naomi Wolf was there. Carol Gilligan was there. So he wanted women to cover the basis for some kind of heterodox thinking. But
Mhm.
anyway, it all got very elaborate. But one of the things I understood about this group of men who had formed, Brockman's much older, and he had formed this group in opposition to the humanities in the early 80s. He and Stuart Brand, and some other men, including John Searle, the philosopher, had sort of had these meetings that I think are a little bit like Mountainhead, the Jeremy Armstrong movie, where just galaxy brain men were kind of going together to talk about how to sort of rule the world. And this is the kind of thing that you could imagine happening in the humanities. You could imagine Timothy Leary and someone else in the 60s sitting and talking about this, but this was Brockman, and they were really frustrated by the humanities. It was like those were the days when, sort of English professors were the ones that like swept undergraduates off their feet, and they were doing deconstruction and post-structuralism, which really bothered a lot of people in the sciences. And the sciences were uncool, right? It was like they were geeky, and they were, not where you would find like dashing men in black turtlenecks who are going to Paris. And they like, who knew what they were up to? And they were kind of making the internet, but you just sort of thought of them as anyway. They were very clear that they were not getting laid, and that and that they were tired of what they called the he said, she said stuff, which would have been, I think, later in the 80s and 90s, like Vanity Fair articles about well-known people behaving badly. And they
And this
felt
is long before what this is like Clinton era. He said, she said, long before Me Too and long before incels were incels.
absolutely right. And
Mhm.
then they had an idea that they wanted to build this third culture. And that third culture was neither. Do you remember for a brief time the culture wars were between science and criticism, literary criticism? And there was some whole conversation about, do literary critics believe that even the constant G is socially constructed? Like they're insane. They don't believe in gravity. And they wanted to just come in and make their mark in this like, um, you know, crazy aslant, probably, maybe a little bit on the spectrum way where they would like know their numbers and know their things and just rule the world. And that was mostly the Whole Earth Catalog and some other really early internet stuff. But it took off. And that resentment toward women and toward the humanities and toward very like language-based cultural criticism as a way to
Mhm.
really understand the world. So like they hate Foucault, they hate all this stuff. Now this would seem to be a very esoteric place to start. Like why not start with Teal and apartheid as you brought up, or South African roots? But I think it's really important because I think one of the things that subsequent members of Brockman's circle, which was ended up being called Edge.org. Edge was his organization, edgy, right? You were like coming up with crazy, cool ideas. And Jeffrey Epstein at the center of this, and Teal also one of the group showing up at Mountain Head style retreats to talk about how to rule the world, is that people started to secretly, and this is where I came in the early aughts, they started to want to be essayists. And there was a time when I looked up Paul Graham, the venture capitalist, and Mark Andreessen, and the first things they would call themselves is essayist in their
Wow.
self-description.
Wow.
And, they were doing tweet storms. They were writing on Medium. They were trying to do things like Andreessen's tech manifesto from a couple years ago.
So they're just frustrated writers like the rest
I
of us.
I think they could not publish their big philosophical essays anywhere. And so they used this platform. Like, why would Jack Dorsey have a literary agent? He wasn't selling any books. There was no thought he would sell a book. Henry Ford wasn't like, have a literary agent on hand just in case. And they wanted to come together and talk about ideas. Brockman said, I keep these things secret because otherwise I'd have to invite women and Black people. Um,
Incredible. Just for background for the people listening who may not
yeah,
know who Brockman is,
yeah,
when we say Brockman, and I immediately associate with Epstein, Brockman was the kind of doorman for Epstein into the Silicon Valley world,
that's
and
it.
that's my understanding. He was a literary agent, but also had these pretensions to being, a futuristic science, engineering kind of aware of looking ahead kind of guy.
Yeah,
And the incredible thing about Brockman is that, the women who were associated with Epstein, I'm thinking specifically of Peggy Siegel, who was, door woman for him in New York. It minimally compared with Brockman.
right.
Those people paid dearly.
Yeah,
And he's still, I think, still operating. So that's another, I don't know, actually he's really old, right? But he
he's
didn't
really
he
old,
didn't he
but his
definitely
son,
didn't go down
yeah,
over it, which
but
is,
he But
Yeah.
he got a lot of, so again, not to go too far afield, but
Yeah, I don't wanna
Thiel,
go too far into Epstein because you say the word and it's like the bomb, and then everybody just wants to talk about Epstein,
I mean,
so
and
we really don't care. Just that Epstein had his own reasons for cultivating these people.
that's it. And that's how
It's
you
yeah,
get this world of ideas in part. I mean, there are people in Brockman's circle and even Brockman who've had their reputation besmirched by Epstein's money to edge, but also, and just like the people we're talking about uh, are Harvard people. They're Stanford people. They're
yeah.
actual in evolutionary psychology departments, social science departments. David Brooks was at these things with Brockman. Some of them had their pictures taken with Epstein and some of them not. They went to Pedophile Island. They rode on the Lolita Express plane. And, we hear a lot about Epstein's forays into politics, his sane washing or his washing by philanthropy, which he was really into. But he also really, because of the his interest in eugenics, right? And Peter Thiel has some of this too. He also needed these intellectuals to say he's a galaxy brain, and so he was really covering things on all bases. And Thiel is very much part of this. That rich people, smart people, right, like to be near rich people because they give us money. And you make peace with saying, I mean, I've done it myself. Like, that's a great idea, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, we're definitely going to do an episode on your pet issue if you're going to pay for the whole podcast. I mean, I haven't done this exactly, but all of us know this conversation. And it's they want to be told they're smart. So we want their money and they want to say that they've got a good idea, and they want to send you a little essay that they wrote about the very ideas you're working on and have you say, you've really nailed it or you're a real genius. And one of the things that, like, it's yet again one of the things that rich men can't buy exactly, but will go to the ends of the earth to buy these guys. I don't think that the heads of oil fortunes needed to be considered intellectuals, but people like Peter Thiel and Musk really, really, really do. And I think Mountainhead, I mean, this is the perfect time to be talking about this because they talk about, I don't know how many people, maybe you can send a heart or something if you've seen it, but this is the new Jeremy Armstrong uh, uh, um, movie, and it's about the tech right, and the characters are loosely based on a kind of Musk, Teal. I'm not sure. I keep trying to decide. Is one of them sort of Mark Andreessen? But there are these. They want to spend the weekend. They say they're doing no deals, right? They spend the weekend doing bro-y things, but not money things, mostly blowing sunshine to each other about each other's brilliance. And sometimes quoting Marcus Aurelius, right? Or like the Stoics, and this is so Peter Thiel that somehow in college, because they went to good colleges, right? But they studied computer science or they studied physics. They were very annoyed by the presence of wokery, but never dipped into it. I mean, Thiel's fury at multiculturalism, as he called it then, was not that he was really interested in reading William Blake and thought there were too many feminists reading William Blake. He was just kind of annoyed at people on campus, annoyed at cries about date rape, no focus on the curriculum. But in order to justify a conservative politics, he needed to align himself with interesting conservative views. And a lot of them go to the classics. So Thiel is definitely interested in the classics. He's definitely interested in some Greek idea that allows for, let's call them age discrepant male relationships, right? Relationships with young men, which he has. I just learned that's the right phrase.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah. And also the idea that those relationships are more manly than straight relationships, right? Because it's like you're like a Plato god and you're surrounded by all these people. And there's where Plato comes in because Plato's doubts about democracy are exactly Thiel's, Curtis Yarvin's, all those Mountainhead guys' doubts about it, which is the philosopher kings should be running things.
Mhm.
Like, you shouldn't have to. Thiel just said this. You don't have to wade through persuading dumb people, i.e. voters, women who he, has often said he thinks shouldn't get to vote. They shouldn't have to wade through some kind of persuasive process that's just so muddled, and just the democracy. And, frankly, technocrats on the left have thought this too. Like, oh, like, can't we just have experts that give away vaccines and not have to deal with all kinds of superstitions from the common man, right? And Peter
Mhm.
Thiel has the same thing of just like a bunch of morons. And also, women are going to want to castrate huge galaxy brain men. And when they vote, they will vote for things self-defeating to civilization, namely kindness and the elimination of cruelty and all those things. And in
Mhm.
that way, they're what is called in Mountainhead decels. One of the worst things you can be called now is someone
Is that a
who that's it.
decelerationist?
That's it.
Yes.
Decelerationist,
Mhm.
because they are often collapsitarians, certainly accelerationists, long-termists who want to see us on Mars. They want to see our brains uploaded to this thing. And they're in a sort of sci-fi conversation that mirrors those early conversations in Peter Thiel's first book about the humanities versus the sciences. So some people are interested in thinking galactically about, the future of civilization and humanity and the end of mortality, yeah, like the life eternal, like Teal, and those people are really brainy and they should rule everything, and they can make decisions like it's worth eliminating poor people from the planet now if it saves future generations of AI or whatever it is. All I will say about this before I throw it back to you, Nina, is they're working out sci-fi visions. They want to be like Tolkien or people that were on the edge of. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard is another one who like wrote sci-fi and founded a religion. And it's fictional, right? Like all this stuff of uploading, and this is great in Mountainhead. I really hope people see it. But like the sort of ways that they name check, we're going to upload our brains to the off the grid, or get out of our meat space and live forever. I mean, and at some point the Steve Carell character says, like, we're talking about heaven and the devil. Like, well, it's just these are just like religious topics. And if I sometimes, when I'm feeling tranquil, I think these are people who really, really want to write essays. They really want to be writers.
Incredible.
They really want to write sci-fi visions of the world. It's horrible when you hear about them. I just heard Carl Yarvin, yeah, the Times just did something on someone else that Peter Thiel admires. This neo-monarchist, dark enlightenment figure is another thing they're called.
Curtis Yarvin, and
Oh, sorry,
just for
Curtis.
people, we
Yeah,
don't have to upload all. I'm not probably won't upload, but the Times is really fascinated with him. He's like the Bannon of this era, because the journalists all ran to Bannon in 16, and now I think the Times has given him, well, Ross Douthat, I can't pronounce his
yeah,
name. I
yep,
think gave him like, I don't know how long pages of an interview with Yarvin. And then the other day, you're right, I think that's a Times Magazine story where they've got this incredible photo shoot where he looks like the Dark Prince or whatever,
mhm,
absolutely straight out of Tolkien, straight, and that's the, I often think when I watch these guys, I think how much of what's going on here is literally because they spent their younger days in front of playing Dungeons and Dragons, or playing video games, with the little homunculus, with the sword, and then reading science fiction. And obviously they have terrific educations in terms of engineering, but somewhere there, I don't, was it Stanford that failed to make the link between, here you are an engineer, but also you might want to be have some humanity. And that is the problem, because now we see, the world being um shaped literally by Sachs, Musk, and Thiel,
mhm.
and with the tool of Trump and the MAGAs into this uh, I mean, AI, we haven't even gotten into AI and what's gonna happen to writers and artists and humanism because of that, but just this massive surveillance net that they're creating and this data machine. Now, maybe it should have always been obvious, or at least for the last 5 or 10 years, that this is the way we were heading, as long as we were allowing this kind of massive commercial data harvesting to go on, because
Mhm,
most of it was capitalistic, right? This data harvesting they've been doing it for a long, long time. The companies have been allowed to track. I don't know how many trackings I've got on my phone right now, despite
mhm,
cleaning it out all the time. But that was always there. But now they've we're in this new realm where you actually have the U.S. government and all of its data collection now put into the hands of this company with this foundry program,
mhm,
where anybody now in the government, or apparently people outside the government with special privileges — I read that yesterday, I heard somebody talking about — with special privileges, will be able to dip into it as well
mhm,
and find things out about people that, I mean, we don't even know how much
mhm,
material they've got. And I don't want to sound super paranoid, but I'm just curious about, like, how do we see this? And, there are people like, Barry Weiss, who, I mean,
mhm.
people who, I don't know if you heard that, her interview with him right after the election, in which she called him an oddball outsider, and he was calling Trump's election the triumph of the counter elites. And
Right.
it's a very cringeworthy interview. I think she must get money from him or something. But it was hilarious, but also super alarming, because yes, he's an oddball but he's certainly not an outsider, and
Mhm,
he's elevating this anti-democratic ideology, as you said, the pro-tech monarchist,
mhm,
port philosophe, Curtis
mhm.
Yarvin. He's a kingmaker now. I mean, JD
Right.
Vance is his guy. And
JD
so,
Vance
just
is his guy.
taking it from the Brockman Group and Silicon Valley and the Mountainhead to Washington, D.C., and
Mhm,
to American politics.
mhm.
I mean, talk to me a little bit about that, because you're again in 21, when Max Chafkin's book came out, he was still just sort of on the horizon, this rising strange figure
Yep.
who had only really he'd only given the RNC, I think, 1.5 million or something before he went
Yeah.
to the convention. And then he built Blake Masters, and he built up JD Vance.
Mhm.
um and when you talk, just one more thing, when you talk about the fascist, or sorry, the classics, their fascination with the classics.
Yeah.
We did a project at New York Magazine on Don Jr., who is sort of the conduit again between these guys and his dad. I mean,
Mhm.
Trump doesn't know how to use his phone properly, and they're and crypto. And we did a deep dive into the Twitter world of, fascist Twitter, and a lot of these guys have PhDs that are, they're anons,
Yeah.
online anons, and
Yeah.
they're eugenicists, and they're out racists. And
Right.
they're all followed by, they all have anonymous names, and they're translating these, like, fascist texts from the 19th century, and
Mhm.
Mark Andreessen follows them. And
Oh,
Musk
yeah.
follows them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at. So taking it from Silicon Valley to the actual, practiced, lived politics of our
Mhm.
time.
Yeah. So I think maybe I want to propose like a differential diagnosis just so that we can A/B test our thinking. So one thing we could do is and have done, and I find incredibly interesting, and the Dark Enlightenment just as a philosophical principle, Nietzschean principle in America, the Edgar Allan Poe principle, right? That's like we all have like in sort of more woo-woo circles of that women are drawn to, we have a shadow side, right? Like that's what's really driving us. The id, the sort of dark Freud Gothic thanatotic, right? Like death drive, that all these things are alive in the world. There's this pretend world of civilization, but it's this deep. Scratch it, you'll find all this other stuff. They've taken that idea, that sort of Freudian idea, and put it in blue pill, right? So way I think about it is the blue pill is Prozac. It's like adjust yourself to this world, put a smile on your face, go to work, get a job, get married, have kids, and vote for Obama, some center left president, and just like be American and get with the program. The red pill is something more like speed. It's like, wait a second, this is a bunch of bullshit. I can't believe this is all. I'm starting to see the ways in here. But now we're leaning toward the black pill, which you've probably heard of, which is,
No, tell me about it.
yeah. So the black pill is much more interesting than the red pill, but it's a little more fentanyl. So it's an embrace of like a really, like they'll say necrotic, like sort of the body dying and consuming itself. So very quickly with incels, blue pill would be like, get on Tinder, date, you're okay, take some pictures of yourself with some good lighting, say you're a little taller than you are. You'll get some dates that way, you'll get married, you'll get laid. Second, red pill is like, no, only the Chads with their special surgeries and whatever get it. And it's 80-20, and it's this terrible thing. And I have to learn pickup artist manipulations to, blow past consent and get women, get laid. The black pill is after they've done the pickup training, after they've had plastic surgery, makeup, taken all the lessons, done something for their height, had surgery to raise their height, and it's still not working. And then incels and right-wing people have something called LDAR, lay down and rot, which is like, fuck it. And that's what a lot of Russian philosophers did. It's like withdraw from globalism, withdraw from the world. This is what Peter Thiel tried to do with seasteading. It's just like,
Mhm.
I can't make the Democratic Party work. I certainly can't make the Mitt Romney Republican Party work. None of those things have anything to do with me. I'm the dark edgelord of this kind of video game world that's in my mind, and I'm going to retreat entirely to a whole new philosophical vision. And that could be like pagan one. It could be. There's a great article in the Times, New York Review of Books from several months ago about how far back, like by their conservatism, like how far back, like we think, oh, Republicans like the 50s or something, like they like, nuclear family and social order, but then some of them like the robber barons, and then it goes back and back till
It's medieval.
some people are wait more.
They
They're
want feudalism.
pre-pagan. They're like cave people, and they're like, like paleo. Like, how are you supposed to really be? And
Well,
all this civilization is laid on top of it. So that is a huge Teal thing. Now,
that's Bronze Age pervert.
that's Bronze Age pervert. Exactly, exactly. I don't know that is anyone before the Bronze Age, but yeah, he's Bronze
Ah,
Age to the
well,
yeah.
but before the Bronze Age, I think it's Flintstones,
Oh, that's
and we haven't gotten there yet.
but I'm glad you bring that up and Bronze Age pervert because as much trolling as there is in this, to them there are a lot of lulls in humor, and sometimes they'll say, "I was just like striking a position." And Teal saying of Trump, "Don't take him literally, but take him seriously," is an effort to get at, we're joking. We're saying we're striking provocative poses in order to get a rise out of you, but also for you to take our views seriously. Now, that is very much an essayist move. That's very like Tom Wolfe. Like if you press on Tom Wolfe, he used to say like, the radical chic party wasn't quite how I described it, but it's important to call attention. I think these guys are writing science fiction, and they're writing it online in real time with little like Andrew Tate saying your body, my choice, or Peter Thiel, striking any number of ridiculous poses and saying, you know, underage sex is okay or women shouldn't vote or, little epigrams that get out there, and they get so hard under our skin. And, it really does work. But think of L. Ron Hubbard. Like he created a whole world, like in Dianetics and Battlefield Earth. It's third rate, 10th rate Tolkien, but something about it was sticky enough for people to come in.
Well, it's a
Then
cult.
a
It's a
cult.
cult. Yeah.
And then the operations of Scientology become kind of evil and twisted in their, I mean, more than kind of, in their own way, and violent and aggressive, and they subjugate people and they exploit people. But the heart of it, the sci-fi thing, just loses. Like, that's never happening. And that's sometimes when I hear Yarvin trying to, troll us, and when I hear Peter Thiel trying to troll us, and when I hear Thiel sometimes talk about like super Christian kind of end times doctrine, which he sometimes says. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's all really exciting. Like, it's exciting to know what the Branch Davidians thought, or what NVIDIA thought, or what, Heaven's Gate thought. But they were also wrong. And like, they just were making shit up. And Peter Thiel also makes things up. He will name check regularly the Matrix or the Red Pill, like a lot of them do. Curtis Yarvin loves the cathedral. Like, they have all these
Yeah.
ideas, but sometimes I wish I could just be like, there is no Matrix, right? Remember, that was a movie. And, like, there are no orcs either, and there's there's no, Xenon or whatever that thing is that Scientologists believe in, and there's no whatever Nation of Islam believes in. Like, these things are fictions, and you can't the Turner Diaries is a work of fiction. All these things that, like, generate adulation and approval, whatever, are works of fiction, and they should have crossed the Stanford campus to come to the English department and take one class in reading fiction as fiction. That The Matrix, the movie with Keanu Reeves, is not a documentary. It just isn't. And there are lots of ways that we could, as like English majors, explain to them how to tell the difference. But you don't go and say, like, I really need to find Bilbo Baggins right now, because there is no Bilbo Baggins. There's no Bilbo Baggins. I will go to my grave trying to persuade people that these are fictions. And what are the chances also that Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel are able to write into existence, a surveillance state that what? Steals our brains, where they upload us to the grid. I mean, it could happen, but I think, like with Scientology, the real crimes are being just committed right here on Earth. Whatever their aspirations are to a thousand-year Reich or whatever else, we need to just today look to Los Angeles. Like, what is actually happening? Where are bodies actually being hurt? I think the AI stuff is a huge distraction to get us to think it doesn't matter that people are being beat up in Los Angeles by the Marines in, I think, one of the most unconstitutional acts in American history, to roll in Marines on American people, on protesters of all things.
Mhm.
And, everyone has their whole idea of what is a distraction and what isn't. But I do think, always keep your mind, when you're hearing someone preach a theology or a metaphysics or whatever, that's meant to stick you to it and get you to do what they want. But then they are actually doing other things. And I don't know how they're going to exploit Palantir's data. I don't know, and this is, you've probably mentioned, this is Peter Thiel's organization that does a lot of surveillance work, has government contracts. And I don't know what they're going to do with what Palantir has, but they're doing a lot already, you know. Um, and I think I would look to those things before getting too enchanted by the stories.
Well, I think, this is a good place to end because we're ending on an optimistic note here, which is that they're actually not invulnerable.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think, I mean, obviously, Palantir, the surveillance technology is used on bodies in places like Gaza,
Mhm.
and it will be used elsewhere, and it
Right.
has been used elsewhere. Um, it's not just, unfortunately, just science fiction. It's like actual blood and guts. So,
Yeah, that's
that's the problem. Like,
Mhm.
they build these things, and the people who are building them and who are applying them to our world are these characters that you've just described. They
Mhm.
literally live in a Tolkien world.
Mhm.
And that's the problem that we face. And Yeah, I mean, the solution, more English classes, more humanities departments.
Read fiction as fiction. That's all I think. It's
Absolutely.
much more interesting when you know it's fiction, then you're gonna do less taking, reading fact as reading fiction as fact if you learn to read it as fiction. But, it's kind of pathetic to make a case for the humanities at this date,
I
but I
know, but
actually
we
do
have to
really
do it.
think it's important.
Well, yeah, it is important, and, I think, on that note, I'll let you go. I usually just do it for half an hour, but it took us so long to get Substack to work. It wasn't us, it was the machine.
It was the
Um,
machine.
yeah.
I think it's Teal. We represent a great threat to him, Nina.
I believe it. So listen, thanks for coming on. We will do this again. And thank you so much, audience, for waiting this out. I hope this was interesting. It was interesting to me. I love
Yeah.
seeing you again. Let's get
Love
together
I would love
in
that. I would love that.
IRL.
Yes, IRL for
Okay.
sure. Okay.
All right. See you all later next week.